Welcome back. So, this week I wrote part two of dynamic loading, and it's geared towards competitive amateurs. And what I did in that article, and I'll link it up in the comments, was to try and break things down for you and make it even more simple. So, now there's part one and there's part two, but I wanted to kind of do an introduction to this whole concept of dynamic loading to really explain what we're shooting for and how to do it. So I'm going to do two videos for you. First video is really about general principles. And then in the second video, I'm going to do nuts and bolts, how to lay out the week and also how to manipulate the days in your week. Loading days, easy days, endurance days, peppy days, strength days. So that's the come with the next thing. First up, what are we shooting for? So the idea with dynamic loading is that we and our bodies will give us natural signals when we are ready to perform and receive load and adapt to that load. So something many endurance athletes will find, and a habit many people will have, is this grind through mentality. And they will be able to grind through fatigue, but they will tend to plateau, deal with injuries, illnesses, and setbacks. And the idea is with more variation in our loading days, we will get better adaptation. We're also going to feel better, and we're going to lose less time to illness, injury, and burnout. So although in the short term, particularly if you're chronically fatigued, it's going to feel like you're doing a lot less as you shed all that chronic fatigue. The reality is, over the long term, your chronic load is going to be higher, and your peak load, when you focus and you're in specific prep, can be very high because you will have the capacity to do these very challenging sessions at the appropriate time. So let's talk a little bit about these natural signals. So the sort of the easiest way to sort of check in and get an insight into what's happening with our internal stress is heart rate, stuff that's going on with our heart. And I've always felt that a heart rate monitor is measuring stress because you'll often find that your heart rate elevates when you're stressed, and you might not necessarily be doing work at a high work rate. So I've felt heart rate can be a proxy for stress, as well as heart rate variability can be give us insight into certain elements of stress. And in part one of the article, I talk about using heart rate, morning, evening, as well as training heart rate to give us an insight into how we're coping. The other thing, a natural signal, is noise. And it's not necessarily noise in our environment. It's noise in our heads. How are you feeling emotionally? What's going on with your thought patterns? How's your mood? Do you fly off the handle easily? Are you patient with the people around you? Are you patient with folks on social networks? Are you getting into arguments with people kind of unnecessarily? A friend of mine did a race recently, and he noticed that he was getting into an argument during the race. And the race was at the end of a big block of training. That's a sign of stress. And it's noise. It can be a proxy for stress, internal noise in our heads. And when you get a lot of internal noise, it's usually a sign you're under too much stress. And if you've been training a lot, you've done enough. It's time to back off. Stimulants, to hear those natural signals that our body is telling us, we need to dial down the stimulants. So the big ones for a lot of endurance athletes, intensity. High intensity can sort of amp us up. Another one, caffeine, coffee, another form of stimulant. If you find you need a liter of French press to get out the door in the morning or just to feel normal, odds are you're a little overamped. Your life is too stressed. Likewise, how will you reflect? How will you see that in other ways? Sleep quality, your ability to fall asleep or interrupted sleep. You wake up wide awake after, say, 5 hours. You're overstressed. You're too stimulated. And I saw this recently with someone that said, hey, I can't fall back to sleep. And the individual was taking pride in the fact that they had worked very hard to optimize every single aspect of their life. Well, if you've optimized everything but your sleep, you might be a little over-optimized. And maybe that's what the sleep was telling this individual. So natural signals. So the idea is open up our body's ability to tell us how it's doing. I'll give you some simple things there. The easiest thing is just take a heart rate sample every morning, run it through Marco's app, HRV for training, and that'll give you a bit of an indication on what your normal range is. But as you get used to dynamic loading, you're not going to need these independent signals. You're going to know just by listening to that internal dialogue how you're doing overall. And you're going to have the ability to manage yourself and proactively rest. Now, you're not going to believe that proactive rest works. I didn't believe it, but I had nothing to lose because I had taken a 10-year break. So I was like, okay, I'll try this new thing, because a couple of my buddies over in Sweden looked like they got very good results from it. So what you need to do is generate evidence. So you need to document what you're doing. And that's what this whole project's been about. Me sharing all this information with you is generating evidence that there actually is a better way. And performance is one form of evidence, but another form of evidence is simply how you feel and how you function. As an elite, I was chronically sore and very tired most of the time. And I just accepted that as the price that elite athletes have to pay. Now, there are times where you're going to get tired and you need to get tired, but you don't need to be chronically tired. So what this dynamic loading does is every week it lets me shed fatigue, and it lets me build these weeks on top of each other without getting run down, without getting chronically fatigued. And the metrics enable me to back off before I'm too tired. But you're not going to believe that unless you try it for yourself. And what I mean by that is you really need to get some structured recovery, some recovery minimums into every single week, and then into your overall season. And that's what we're going to get into next time when I lay out a standard week, but also explain to you how to manipulate the loading days and the easy days within that week. So tune in next time, hit that subscribe button. Got plenty more heading your way. Thanks for listening.